appreciate that background. As we move to the next speaker to also give us his perspective, Raphael, I know the current government in its campaign manifesto had stated that the fiscal deficit would move to about, in 5 years' time, around 3% or thereabout. The numbers we are sharing are very high, so we have clearly moved off the rail, but I think we'll take that as part of probably what is it that is being done to just strengthen that space. So as you will be picking up questions later, I think those are things we need to ponder about in terms of how is it that we are managing the space we are in. Now, allow me to bring Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, and as you come in to also give your perspective, we take note that for 2 years you chaired the Budget and Appropriations Committee of Parliament. That is where numbers, deficits are firmed up, even before we go to the financing option around it. But more importantly, from Parliament, you can give us some oversight mechanisms that you think can be implemented to ensure that we have sustainable borrowing. What role should Parliament play in approving or scrutinizing debt instruments like the Eurobonds? Because we've had varied conversations around them, including from the former Auditor General. And how do we reconcile political priorities from fiscal discipline? So over to you, Ndindi Nyoro. Tumpigie makofi akikuja. There are very few leaders who are ready to have conversations around public debt at a very deep level. So we really appreciate your engagement. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Hesbon, the chair of ISPAC, Professor.
We can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Team.
Omolo, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mwakazi, but I'm struggling to hear Mheshimiwa Ndindi.
I think my voice is becoming better every day. If I'm compared to Mwakazi.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Are you okay, Omolo, now?
Now we can hear you.
Clearly, you can choose what to hear. Thank you very much. The chair of ISPAC, let me call you Professor Liz, and the CEO, Dr. Grace Kamau, and all the distinguished participants in this conference. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be very precise and direct. I thought we had more time, but after the debrief, I thought I was briefed that we'll have a longer session for Q&A. And therefore, I'll just highlight a few things, because I think in this kind of conference, highlighting is just enough. But it's important that I say that from the place I represent, that is Kiharu, because debt, money, budget, everything is about impact. I am very glad to be the MP for Kiharu, where all our public primary schools, all of them are very well done. They look like academies. All our classrooms in our primary schools are tiled, courtesy of NGCDF. It's also important I highlight that in Kiharu we run a program called Kiharu Masomobora. Kiharu Masomobora takes care of over 12,500 day school learners in all our 61 to 65 day schools. I say so because some are new. And school fees in Kiharu, in all our public day schools, that is secondary schools, we have subsidized, and school fees is only 1,000 per term. And learners eat in school in Kiharu, they eat in school from Monday to Saturday in all our day schools, and they actually eat chapati every last Friday of the month. I mean, I'm not promising. They have been doing that for the last 1 year. because I know there are many stories around that. So you can verify it is there, and I'm very, very proud to be having that kind of impact. And the impact is also in figures in terms of a transition, the people joining Kiharu from other places, and I'm very glad. I was chairman of budget, and it's important that I say that in Parliament, there are 3 committees that deal directly with the economy. And forgive me, I'll be talking very fast, because I have very little time. So, budget committee only deals with expenditure, where the money is going. There is actually a committee in Parliament called debt and privatization. And therefore, the issues I talk about debt is not based on where I was. It is based on the issue is very important for the country. There is a substantive committee with the chairman in Parliament dealing with debt. The revenue side also, there is a committee called finance. Finance deals with taxes and where the money is coming from. I thought it's good I make that distinction, because I can see that you need that clarification. Now, going direct to the numbers, I have listened to my brother from the National Treasury. And in this kind of a conference, we don't come here to see who wins the debate. From my perspective, we come here to see how we can lay a good basis for our economy. Any part we can play, whether positive criticism or actually doing it, is welcome. And therefore my presentation will be based on how can we make our country better. And therefore the figures I'll be laying forward are not based on countering what the DG of in the National Treasury talked about. It will just be because if we just let one voice proceed, we may end up believing it to be true. So it is important we give all the divergent views with the hope of finding a good basis for the welfare of our country. And I will start here because I listened to him, so that even as I give my figures, we have the right perspective. He talked about debt in our country. And I'll just highlight one so that we are able also to, when we hear anything coming especially from even government, we have expertise here to actually verify. The economy of Kenya is projected to be around $131 billion US by end of this year. That means it's around 60.9 trillion, thereabout. The debt in Kenya is 12.5 trillion now. So when we talk about debt to GDP ratio, we must never massage the denominator. Because you can just take your calculator now, tell me 12.5 divided by 16.9, whether it is 64% as he presented. It is actually over 70% debt to GDP ratio. So it is important we, as Kenya, we be very factual with our data, so that when we report figures that has GDP in it, we don't massage GDP, either inflate it or whatever, to give us the right parameters that we need. Let me go back to my presentation. In 2003, when President Kibaki took over, the debt in Kenya was 600 billion Kenya shillings. 600 billion Kenya shillings when President Kibaki took over. By the time he left, it was around 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings. And therefore, President Kibaki borrowed roughly, because there are some decimal points, around 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings for the entire 10 years he was president. And therefore, he was borrowing around 120 billion every, it's actually 100 billion every year. When President Uhuru Kenyatta took over, the debt was 1.8 trillion. In 2022, the public debt in Kenya was 8.7 trillion Kenya shillings. And therefore, he borrowed around, we can say 7 trillion. So in every year, he was borrowing roughly 700 billion shillings. There is a reason I'm giving these figures. The current administration, when it took over, the debt was 8.7 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, as we talk with you today, the legal debts, because there are others which I'll talk about, the legal debt is 12.5 trillion Kenya shillings. And therefore, in that span of less than 3 years, Kenya has borrowed 3.8 trillion Kenya shillings. And therefore, Kenya is borrowing 1.25 trillion Kenya shillings every year. And therefore, the money Kibaki borrowed in 10 years, we are borrowing every year. And therefore, every day, we are borrowing 3.5 billion shillings every day. So this conference will be here for a week. So by the time you go back to Nairobi, you can do the calculations. That is the legal debt. Those who follow politics of Africa, you must have followed the politics of Senegal last year, where two gentlemen, that is Diomaye Faye and Osman Sonko, they are currently the president and the prime minister respectively, were actually had been locked in by government then. They campaigned for only 10 days and won, only 10 days. Because people were fed up that time. Upon assuming office, please give me some water, Prof. I think this needs cooling off. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Upon assuming office in Senegal last year, they realized that the government of President Macky Sall in Senegal had borrowed between 7 to 13 billion US dollars of the book. What is of the book? There is a register the DG in the National Treasury is referring to. That is the one when you go to the Central Bank of Kenya and all the government data, you'll get to see how much is the debt in Kenya. That was the same book they thought was legitimate in Senegal then. Upon assuming office, they realized there were some debts baptized in other names. You can call it securitization, you can call it revenue-backed board, you can call it asset-backed board. In Kenya, they have names. One is called securitization of road maintenance levy fund. The other one is called Talanta board. The other one is many others. So they realized there was 13 billion US dollars borrowed off the book. As we talk today, the duo that was very popular in Senegal last year, just wait in the next few months. Actually, issues have already started. Why? Because it is important for a country to maintain one book of debt. And I've been talking about this issue because of the enormity of its importance. Kenya must stop borrowing of the book. Beyond the reported debt of 12.5 trillion, Kenya has already borrowed an illegal debt of 175 billion shillings, where they have gone to the banks, taken a loan of 175 billion, and then they are telling the banks they'll be collecting the fuel levy for the next 7 years. And I'm here wondering, the people in the National Treasury and in government, if you came in to lead and you realize that all the revenue had been securitized, then you'd be elected to do what? So that's one. Second is called Talanta board. The Talanta Stadium you see, the cost is 45 billion in present value. But it is important for Kenyans to know that Kenya actually took a loan of the book of 45 billion shillings. And do you know what? Now, we'll be servicing that debt using sports fund. Every month, 500 million shillings. In 15 years, a debt of 45 billion shillings, Kenya will pay an interest rate of 100 billion Kenya shillings. And therefore, the cost of the Talanta Stadium in Nairobi, the one you see on Gong Road, is not 45 billion. It is the most expensive stadium in the world. It will be 145 billion in the next 15 years. So I've been requesting the people who are dealing with our debt, no one anakuzuia kukopa, but please let us maintain, as we have done in the past, only one book of debt. And this issue, again, was just discovered in Kenya last year. Actually this year, 2025, since independence, we have never done securitization. We have never done those kind of boards. It is important that when we get a squeeze on the normal borrowing, let us not expose Kenya by opening other secret, illegal books of loans. Policy, the issue of policy. I'm just going top line. As you realize nowadays, the fiscal policy in Kenya has now been hijacked by debt. And this is how. The reasoning of the National Treasury, they are my friends, some are doing their best. The fiscal policy in Kenya currently is only addressing one issue to the detriment of the others. Why? If you look at both fiscal actuary and monetary policy, if you look at the issue of interest rate, we keep seeing the CBR is coming down. But if you look at the rating to the private sector, it's decimated. It is either stagnant or going down. So to whose interest is the interest rate in Kenya going down? It is basically because of domestic debt service. And that is why you see now the composition of debt in Kenya, and everything has ramifications. Previously, we are 50-50, that is domestic and foreign. But over time, we are now past 60 domestic. Why? Because Kenya does not want to be accountable to the external lenders. And you can see the trend. If IMF asks questions, what is our response as Kenya? We come to crowd out businesses in terms of credit in our banks. So we borrow internally. So in Kenya, the banking sector is making every year a return in terms of growth in profit, but it's not in tandem with the productive sectors of the economy. Because the government is dominant in lending, in borrowing. In the economic classes, we used to be told, the work of government is to release money to the economy, either through banks, through fiscal policy. Now we have inverted. Now the work of the government currently is to mop up money from the pockets of the people and from the pockets of the banks to do the public projects. But you're only transferring farm and consumer, farm and individual consumption to public consumption. Sorry, I just said I'll be doing the highlights. If you look at the exchange rate in Kenya, the exchange rate in Kenya is currently misaligned by around 12 to 18%. Misaligned in the favor of the Kenya shillings. Why? Because of the service of external debt. But what is the ramification of that? What is the ramification of having a misaligned currency, a stronger one? If you look at the graph of the Kenya currency, when Kenya was having its best years during President Kibaki's time, the Kenya shillings was actually misaligned to weaken, not to strengthen. Because when you strengthen the local currency, what are you basically doing? You make payment of interest rate cheaper, but you make all our exports less competitive, and number two, you make all the imports very attractive. That is why you see when the Kenya shillings is misaligned just because of debt, then we take a toll on the other sides of the economy, and especially the balance of payment, and in regards to the production side, not just the capital inflow and outflow. Let me, as I come to the conclusion, just say that what I have realized is that whatever PR you play around numbers, numbers will always betray you. If I say 4 plus 4 is 8, and somebody else is saying, no, it can be 9. Whether you paint it in black, in yellow, in red, 4 plus 4 will always be 8. And this is the reason I'm saying that. Beyond the paintings we are doing around how we are managing debt, how we want to do this, and how we've been doing this, numbers and figures always summarize stories. Numbers and figures always summarize narratives. Now, let me go back to the same regimes I talked about so that you compare by yourself. And you tell whether the policies now, the fiscal policy, because everything is boiling down to debt, is working or not. And I'll use the figure that encompasses everything, which is the GDP growth. GDP growth takes care of exchange rate, balance of payment, everything else. President Mwai Kibaki took over the economy of Kenya when the GDP in Kenya was 19 billion US dollars. By the time he left, I'll actually give 3 years just to accommodate everyone, because currently we are in our third year. 19 billion US dollar was the economy of Kenya when President Kibaki took over in 2002, 2003. In his first 3 years, up to 2005, the GDP of Kenya was 26 billion US dollars. And therefore, the growth in 3 years was 36%, just taking this and use at the base. It was 36%. When President Uhuru took over in 2013, the GDP of Kenya was 61 billion US dollars. In his first 3 years, the GDP of Kenya was 74 billion US dollars. And therefore, the economy of Kenya by then grew by 21% in 3 years. Now, the current administration took over when the GDP of Kenya in almost 2023, 2022 was 114 billion US dollars. We are projecting the economy of Kenya to be 131. We are not already there because it's by the end of the year. But the projection by the end of the year, it will be 131 billion US dollars. So if you do the math in dollar terms, that is 14.9%. Now, all of us, most of us here, did NEC exams, which was out of 100. And for you to do CPA, I think most of you got A's in many things. So for us to come closer home and NEC, let's multiply by 2 so that we see. Because our mentality is NEC, even me. I mean, everything I mark is about NEC. So if you times by 2, that exists by 2, that comes to around 72%. In NEC, what is grade is that? What is 72% in NEC? Isaidieni tafadhali, nyinyi watu wa CPA. What is 72% in NEC? Anyone who did a NEC exam lately? Especially this is a KCP, KCSE. I think over time it was an A or something. Now, 21 times 2 is 42%. What is 42% in terms of NEC? That is, after Kibaki, that's the one that was following. Currently, after 3 years, it is 14.9%. What is 14.9% times 2? It is what? No, first say the number before you say the grade. 14.9% times 2 is what? 29.8, is it? What grade is it in NEC? What grade? Are those my figures? You can go to KNBS, CBK. I have used government data. Let me also come back home as I finish. Regionally. And these things I'm saying them because we need to be frank about our country so that we know where do we get from where we are. In the year 2024, Kenya grew by 4.7%. I have tried to take many sources and average them. World Bank, UNDP, Kenyan figures, and average them. So the Kenyan GDP grew by 4.7% last year. How did our neighbors fare? Uganda grew by 6%. Tanzania, I have actually taken all the sources and averaged. Tanzania grew by around 6.1%. Rwanda grew by over 8%. So I am talking about this so that Ethiopia, grew by around 7%. So we need to know, when we reflect about what we are doing in Kenya, beyond the story we are giving, we need to look at the underlying. The other day I heard Kenya was to be closed for celebrations because I heard there was a big announcement that the GDP of Kenya has been projected by IMF to be the number 6 biggest economy in Africa. And I actually thought we are going to have a national holiday to celebrate. But these are the facts. In the year 2021, listen to me carefully. In the year 2021, the GDP of Kenya was 109.88 billion US dollars. I'll give in dollar terms because even that celebration was in dollar terms. Kenya, listen carefully. In 2021, Kenya was the number 6th largest economy in Africa. In 2022, the GDP of Kenya was 114 billion US dollars. In 2022, during election year, Kenya was the number 6th largest economy in Africa. In 2023, we already had a new government by then. Out of the mismanagement of the currency, in dollar terms, the economy of Kenya went to 109 billion US dollars in 2023. That is the point where Kenya became number 7 after being overtaken by Ethiopia. In 2024, the economy of Kenya persisted to be number 7 in the world at around 120 billion US dollars. So this year, we are now coming to number 6 again. You know, a guy who can come, demolish your permanent house in a village, demolish deliberately. After demolishing because he has money, then calls a village to join for Harambee, and he volunteers to build your house. But instead of building the Mawe house you had, the permanent one, he builds you a Mabati house, and he wants the whole village to hail them as a very benevolent leader. Because Kenya was number 6 largest economy in 2021, in 2022, so returning it to where it was, is that a cause of celebration?
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I get a minute? Omolo.
Yes, yes. Yes.
And that is the reason why Omolo, most of the projects in Kenya, I mean, just try to have your mind go across the country. Look at any project you can identify. I've talked about debt in Kenya. We are borrowing 3.5 billion every day. I've talked about the illegal debts in securitization, Talanta Board, and the rest. They actually are in the plan of securitizing your housing levy for the next 10 years. So they want to take a loan, and the security will be your housing levy. So the government that will come will realize the housing levy was already collected for the next 10 years. But that's not the point I had. The point is this. Of all the projects you know happening in Kenya now, starting with one that we are celebrating, Rironi Mau Summit, it's not part of the debt. It's also not part of the illegal debt. It is another issue. It is your pension money through NSSF that is building that road. So it is not the borrowed money I talked about. It is also not the illegal boats. It is also not the securitization. It's also not your taxes. Talk about a project like Nyota. You must have heard every government official talked about Nyota. It's also not Kenyan money. It's World Bank money. The expansion of Pangani, Muthaiga, Kiambu, Duberi Road is also not your taxes. That is Chinese money. The smart city project happening in Nairobi is also not part of your taxes. That is South Korean money. Any project you may talk about, even Talanta Stadium, is also not part of the debt I talked about, is also not part of your taxes. That is an illegal debt. So the question I have, and the DG I'm sure is listening, where are you taking the money you are borrowing? And where is then the taxes going? Because you'll tell us about budget support. Which budget support? Lecturers are striking for 42 days because of 7 billion. JSS interns, we are still debating about their confirmation. Capitation, the government now wants to reduce school fees for the scholars, capitation for the scholars, and the parents in Kenya will be paying over 20,000 shillings for day school from January, according to the circular that was sent by government this term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mheshimiwa. You brought out thought-provoking points that I hope our Director General at National Treasury has picked. So there are definitely questions that need to be responded to. Before we bring in Diana Gishengo, something Mheshimiwa Ndindi Nyoro, just for you to take note that you will share with us some feedback on, which would be important to cover. In 2014, Kenya did something very interesting. We did rebase our GDP. And by that action, we moved from our categorization as a poor nation to a low-income country that allowed us to get into the commercial borrowing space. That is how Eurobond was born. The first batch of that Eurobond borrowed in 2014 was paid in 2024, and in dollar terms. So it would be good to speak to what that did to the economy in 2024 in terms of weakening the Kenya shilling, but I think it's part of the conversation we must have in this space. But before we get there, we are honored to have Diana Gishengo from TISA. She's an advocate, but beyond that, she's a very passionate citizen of this country. And we'd want to hear from you, Diana. Having listened to the two gentlemen, how can citizens be meaningfully engaged in debt decisions that affect generations? And what about transparency gaps that exist in Kenya's debt contracting? And how can they be closed? And even more importantly, how do we ensure accountability in debt utilization to avoid corruption and inefficiency? And we take note of the good work TISA has been doing to bring to fore the ugly side of what happens in the public space that we need to clean out. Karibu sana, Diana. Take it on. You can come here. Yeah.
You know, hata uwezi anza vingine ni we. Good afternoon, fellow taxpayers. Good afternoon, walipa ushuru. Si tunalipa ushuru? It is indeed an honor to be before all of you distinguished CPAs and FCPAs, aspiring accountant. But away from all those titles, wacha tubaki na taxpayers, because titles itaisha, okay? And I have been introduced as an active citizen. I also hold, listening to Honorable Ndindi, hey, aki Mungu asaidie wengi watoke, watuambie ni nini inafanyika huko. Sindio? When you come to issues of governance, we say all your responsibilities and titles can go away, but your Kenyan citizenship itasimama. Unajua kama neno ya ulimwengu yakiisha, uraia wako utasimama. I won't go into the figures because that has been said very, very well. But before I ask and I speak to what citizens can do, is there an echo? Ama ni mimi najisikia? Yeah? Oh, sorry, I am an activist, so I am loud because we are used to microphones being switched off because of the truths we speak. Speaking on where Honorable Ndindi has left and what Raphael has said, the government has been saying we have not defaulted. Sindio? And the same question that has been raised around the Eurobond of 2014 that was repaid through a buyback, we extended. We bought another Eurobond to repay. Sindio? Uhasibu sako iko hapa. So this is very easy mathematics. We borrow from Sindio, Uhasibu Sako as accountant. There is a loan that is due. Before we repay, we cannot feed our children. Have we defaulted or have we not defaulted? Aya, wacha tuongeze. We cannot pay the mama mboga where we have borrowed some food or groceries. We have pending school fees. Have we defaulted or not defaulted? Accountants, nijibini. Have we defaulted? In our books of account, have we defaulted? Is our balance sheet balancing? Kenyans, we have pending bills that we cannot pay. We have pensioners that we cannot pay. We are not able to send capitation to schools. Niendele. IBC mujue hatuna pesa ya kulipa uchaguzi. We do not have 61 billion to protect the right to democracy. Even our police, tunaambiwa sasa turudi kuwekea mafuta. But because we have not defaulted, that is a painful reality of what debt and bad governance, corruption and greed has brought to this country. So the topic was whether we should default or default. Together we have created in consensus that Kenya is in default. So we now need to discuss how we manage the default. Why I say we are in default is because Article 201 of our Constitution, and sasa mimi ni wakili and I know there are wakilis on this other side. When you start drafting, the first clause is the most important. Our national revenue ought to first go to national interest. Then secondly, to debt. If you think about our national interest, which is well anchored through the Constitution and Vision 2030, education is a national interest. Health, water, at a last mile electricity is national. If we are not able to meet those obligations, then our contract with the state, there is a major default when you think about fiscal constitutionalism. Okay? So I am saying we are in default as a citizen, not an economist, as a citizen. But I have spoken to economists from many countries and in particular, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a country that we have very many similarities. They love the streets just like us, but we are way ahead of them. We have better institutions. Our democracy is more robust. But because of the haircut that they received, a number of them have invested in analyzing Kenya, and we need a national conversation on how to treat our debt. Raphael has given us numbers. Mine are more aligned to, we are at 12 trillion. Sindio? 12.05. Treasury website, September. He quoted the June one. Sindio? Deni ni vizuri, one of the things we must do as active citizens is we must know our current debt. After all, the government adopted accrual accounting. You are the accountant. Which debt figure should we be using? June, or we are now in November? We should actually be using October. If not today, but the month ends in November. We must know our liabilities at any given moment. So if this is the debt level we are at, and if you look at the analysis, today the budget review outlook papers were launched, and I think the budget hearings are underway. Last year, the budget was revised 3 times. The budget was revised 3 times. Now, and Honorable Ndindi, when you come back, please tell us why they are supplementary budgets and whether they are a good thing for this country or not. Last year we had 3 supplementary budgets. The only other time we've had 3, there was COVID. What was the emergency? Do you remember? Last year, the emergency was that Kenyan youth demanded good governance. That is why we had 3 supplementary. In the first supplementary, the estimated, in the printed estimate, the revenue that was projected there was 3.3 trillion. When Gen Z complained, we revised this down to the revenue to 3.060. Then we had a second revision. This one is the government, 3.068. It went up. Then the final one, they realized it's not possible to raise. We went down to 2.9. Overall, from the printed estimates to the last figure, there was a downward revision of 386 billion. An ambition that we had, therefore we planned for wastage and opulence. Now, the Gen Z and all of you, the Kenyan people, have helped because this year's 2025-2026, the deficit is projection. They were revised by the time the estimates were done, but it's still very early in the day. Unfortunately, even with all this, the final deficit, when we did the printed estimates, the deficit was 649 billion. The final statement had a deficit of 1.0 trillion. Why do we plan with deficits? Accountants, why do you allow government to plan with such huge deficit? A deficit means 2 things: additional tax or additional debt. And additional debt is additional future, more expensive and painful tax. Because whereas debt is a good thing, when debt is borrowed by people who do not fit the code of Chapter 6 of our Constitution, the cancer we get is the cancer we are facing right now. Pain, more pain, torture, and more torture. But imagine the government doesn't care. Because the private sector, the credit share they control is only 31% of the GDP. Yet government has decided we will now borrow completely just from the domestic market. We will edge out every farmer, every manufacturer, as long as we remain in power. Because when you borrow externally, there may be a chance to be held more accountable. So the areas of actions are one, and the Kenya Bankers Association has said the government needs to stop borrowing at the rate they are borrowing in terms of treasury bills and treasury bonds. Because unless we get income, we will not be able to pay the tax. ISPAC, can you start a campaign so that we move from the current projection of over 70% of the borrowing by government coming from banks, commercial institutions? Now they even want to go to our SACCOs, pensions, na NSSF imeshaenda. We need to get this back to 30 so that it is private sector that is occupying the 70%. It is the only way that we even create the additional taxes. Kenya currently has no space to increase taxes. Active citizens, we must ask that our taxes be reduced. Ndio hata wale tuko na kamshahara kadogo, we be able to finance our cousins and brothers, ndio waanze biashara, waache kuchukua loan ya World Bank ambayo tutalipa. We can ease our own pay slips. But that's not the most painful. Those are some of the more social issues where the pain is. What can we really do? One, at this point, and I speak on behalf of Okoa Uchumi, we will be telling the country we need a national conversation on debt and how to restructure. Loudly tell everybody that we are restructuring. Because currently, the government has already restructured. Bonds have been renegotiated to have longer maturity rates. It is colored very well, okay? Long maturing to ease certain things. It's just kicking the can down the road. So that when the day of reckoning comes, there will be a different person in power. That person will find empty coffers. Secondly, please join us when the executive and parliament fail us in going to court and enforcing those decisions. Because the securitization of funds, very ring-fenced funds, should concern us all. A fund that is ring-fenced is something that was debated in Parliament, and we realized for our own growth, to realize our Vision 2030, we needed to ring-fence it, to do the work. Housing levy, mimi hiyo sijui, hiyo uzuri, the next government must do away with it. But let's speak to petroleum levy, and it could even be the social health insurance fund. What happens to our health imperatives if that is used for other purposes? All debt ought to be approved by Parliament. Who approves when this is securitized? The debts don't end there. See, we cancel Dadani. We cancel Dadani, good people, right? But they are about to be paid. Breach of contract. Contingent liabilities is a different level of debt. What must we do? We must invest in budget oversight as citizens. Every single stage, we must let the executive and parliament know that we know what they are doing. Because ultimately, we are the taxpayers. Secondly, I hope we will come out in numbers and insist that we must have a deficit continuously by the time it's 2028. We must either move to balanced budgeting or do away with deficits. We must be bold about what we will do to audit the workforce. We must audit, and there must be sanctions for corruption. internal audit departments, whistleblowers. Previously, I worked with ISPAC on Wapinduru, when accountants were being killed for being whistleblowers, fired, and so on, okay? But we are yet to make the strides. But internal audit departments can stop the pain of taxation and the pain of debt. You're the institute that regulates them. How do we strengthen them and get all their voices together? As we move to restructuring, please note, the haircut will, for us, because most of our debt is Kenyan. Most of our debt is Kenyan. The haircut will first be felt by Kenyan institutions. But it is coming because we refused to work on an interest rate that is appropriate. What else can citizens do? Join to ensure that never again do we have double-digit interest rates for sovereign debt. How do SACCOs have lower interest rate than how a state borrows? There's a reason why it's called sovereign debt, because it is ought to be anchored not only in capitalism, but also in socialism. Like Ndindi, we would have hoped for more time. Before we die of debt and economic misery, let's start taking these steps that we can as accountants. We have a more detailed paper that we will be launching, and we will be launching a people's audit to define how we move forward on 8th December. Other than that, the people you vote, the people we all vote, determine the quality of life we live based on how they manage our resources. Asanteni sana walipa ushuru.
Another round of applause. I think our panelists have raised very pertinent questions, and before we go to Q&A, something has pricked my mind. 400 billion plus is given to counties every year. We spend not less than 1 trillion on debt service, and our salaries for the public sector at national level is over 600, almost 700 billion. Before anything else, the taxes collected are done. For the last 3 years, the deficit is over almost 1 trillion. Where is this money coming from? But I like where Diana's pitched. We can't have a country where sovereign debt is costing us double digits. The blue chip companies of this world are happy to give the shareholders 10% return on investment. Which is this business that nation Kenya is doing, that it gives up to 13, 14% on the bonds, which constitute 80% of our domestic debt. So Raphael, the question comes back to you. As an ordinary Kenyan, I would be asking, if the IMF and other multilateral lenders can give us loan at 3, 4%, even if it is dollar denominated, let's talk about the risks. Why would I shun that for a domestic debt that is going to cost me an average of 10% or 11%? Would it have been good for us to retire the Eurobond and replace with a cheaper external debt, or would that impair our strategy around debt balancing? So I think the issues that the panelists have raised are important. So as you respond to the question that the audience will be asking, I know there could be many questions and time is well spent, let us also speak to where do we want to go, because we've heard from Raphael a rosy picture. There is a strategy to manage our public debt. We've heard from Ndindi Nyoro, you can fail to go eat lunch because of where you think your country is. And Diana has also aptly put it that we must be vigilant as professionals to anchor our country the right way and elect the right leaders. But also to Diana and the legal fraternity, there is no better team to define Chapter 6 than the people within the legal space. and your judges, who are your colleagues in the LSK, have defined the thresholds. Until you exhaust all appeal mechanisms, we are all free citizens. I think we need to have a conversation on what Chapter 6 also means. I open it to the audience. We'll take 3 questions here at Sarova, do another 3 in the other venues, and then we'll take the online audience too, and then we can anchor it there. So we'll start, Mwakazi, from
Pride in One is ready.
White Sands here.
Okay.
I'll take one from the other end, another here, then probably a final one there. So could you start from the other end? Let the mic move very quickly. Be very brief. No more stories, just the question.
Good morning, fellow CBS and delegates. Thank you to Mr. Nyoro. My question goes to Honorable Nyoro. From your analysis, we have seen that for the last 3 years in this administration, there was a borrowing of 1.25 trillion per year. And it happened that you have been the chair of Budget and Appropriation Committee. And from my understanding, borrowing comes after budgeting. When you budget for your expenditure, is when now borrowing comes. How comes you have been silent for all those too long? You have been the chair of the budget committee, and you have been giving us a huge budget for borrowing, and you came to talk to us now that you have been relinquished the position of the budget committee.
Thank you.
Can we say that you are insincere to us, or you have something else to hide? Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Let's come to the middle here.
Thank you very much. I am Samuel Makutwa from Odisha, Vihiga. First question to Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, that you talked about the achievements in Kiharu constituency. How is it possible to achieve all those, and how can it be replicated throughout the country? And then to Diana Gichengo, you talked about the leadership that we elect, and that is what determines our future. But in Kenya, you find that we are like that person who keeps on going to a toxic lava. We do all this education to the public, but when it comes to election time, we again choose the wrong leaders. How can we stop that trend? Thank you.
Thank you. We come here.
I think also because of time, my name is CPA Vincent Opanga. Mine is also to Honorable Nyoro, Ndindi Nyoro. First is to appreciate Nyoro. Thank you very much for the information you have given us. We actually need more and more people to scrutinize what government is doing so that this information is disseminated to the members of the public. My question, however, is considering the way GOK is borrowing, do you think it's safe to continue buying the T-bills and the treasury bonds when they are floated? Because every other day, the debt is actually accumulating. Is it safe to continue buying more and more? Or is it time we get to a point where we say, what should we do?
Thank you, we hear you.
My question is to Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. What is the space of labor unrest in this country and their contributions to what we are seeing in terms of debt? Because every day we see people are going on the streets, they are demanding for increased pay. There is a direct correlation between when they go on strike and a CBA is done for them, which was off the budget. So I think as a country, we also have a role. So as legislatures, what are we going to do about the wage bill in this country?
Thank you. Finally.
My question goes to Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, and thank you for the presentation. I think arising out of what all the panelists have presented, mine is just curiosity. Is there a robust level of interconnectedness between the Budget Committee, the Debt and Privatization, and the Finance Committee? Or how is it that the expenditures that are brought out by the budget committee are never, are not, there's no parallel to what the finance can reasonably raise. So is there a robust level of interconnectedness?
Thank you. Allow me to now move to Pride in One.
Okay, good afternoon.
Pride in One, please.
My name is Terry Ondiko. My question goes to the DG, the PDMO. Given the rise in the public debt in the domestic borrowing, what is the PDMO strategy in ensuring that we're not crowding out the private sector in terms of getting the credit?
You can take two more from Pride in One.
Honorable Ranguma, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Ranguma. I just want to start by saying there should be a national debate on debt. If the Institute can organize a debate that delves into the real issues that we hear and get in touch with, I think it would be important. But allow me to thank all the presenters because they have presented their views from different angles, and I want to appreciate all of you. Question one relates to growth, and growth was presented to us by Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. I'm not going to speak to you as a politician, but I'll speak to you as an accountant. When you presented the figures of Kibaki's administration in terms of GDP, you talked of 19 billion growing to 26, and you gave us a growth rate of 36%. Then you moved to Uhuru administration. That started from 61 billion, ended up into around 74. Then you went to President Ruto'S administration, starting from 114 billion to 131. As an accountant, I am comfortable knowing how the figures ran from the year 2002 to 2025. Now, we are dealing with figures we don't seem to reconcile. We are ending at 26, then starting at 61 in another administration, then moving to start at 114. Now, that means we are not connecting those figures to give us a true picture of what we should expect. Number two relates to what the lady from TESA talked about, and I think I would like to connect it to debt as well, because she talked about accrual accounting, and there seemed to be a misunderstanding of what accrual accounting should do, because she said that the figures are changing, but not reflecting a true position. Now, perhaps when we implement fully the concept of accrual accounting, then we will have an opening balance of a debt every year, and we'll have a view of what is progressing. And I think I want to leave it there because it is important that, so that then we also, as politicians, we can also create a law that develops a baseline. As I enter, we establish a baseline, and then we grow from that baseline as we move to reflect what we have done in the period we are in office. Thank you very much. I rest my
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I want to appreciate presentation from on Ndindi Nyoro, which is good. But I want to say that as a nation, our undoing actually comes from leadership position. Because every year, the Treasury will do their estimate and forward to the National Assembly. They'll have to consider both expenditure and revenue. One thing that we are actually killing this nation is that every year we are increasing expenditure. The moment expenditure are actually increased, then we have to finance it. Option that we have is using the ordinary revenue, which automatically comes with you and my taxes. Then the bit of it has to come from other means, including domestic borrowing. So the question that we must ask ourselves as Kenyans, what are we borrowing money for? What are we spending on? Because the draft of the Constitution thought that we are supposed to only borrow to finance meaningful development. But I'm aware that today we are borrowing to finance recurrent expenditure. So we must move forward as a nation by agreeing, number one, we must be able to cut our coat according to our size. Number two is to ensure that we are only going to borrow money going forward to finance things that can be seen that has got value in the future and not to finance expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, FCPA, husband.
Thank you, Mwakazi and the team from Pride in 1. We go to Pride in 2. Bishanga, you could have 2 questions as well.
CPA Ibrahim, please go ahead.
Okay, we hear you now.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Honorable CPA Adadur Ibrahim. My question goes to Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, I want reflecting on debt, starting from Kibaki's time. When Kibaki left in 2022, our debt was at 1.7. And Uhuru took over, it reached up to 10.7. And this regime, when you are chairing the budget committee, we took up to 2 billion. We should look at where the rain has started beating us. We should not, when we are giving analysis, I think it is important we consider the analysis as a whole, not politics. But the question is, everybody speaks when he gets out. And that is very unfortunate to the nation. What can we do, including me, if I'm given the position? Maybe I'll be the same. How can we stop that? That we should speak while we are in government, especially the oversight members who Kenyans elected to oversight their resource. We don't want someone coming out after he has been removed, telling us this, and because you are part of it. The other thing is, how can we collectively, for example, Kenyans, we are collecting around 1 trillion. The debt is 600 billion. We have, the salaries is around 600 billion. We have some recurrent expenditure to consider. We have debt to service. So what is left for the development? How can you now come up with the modalities without politicizing the situation, at least to even help the government to finance the development project? Because we want development. We cannot be without development. Like a place like in Wajir, it is for the first time we are getting a tarmac road. If you say government should not borrow, they don't have. Shall we stay without a tarmac road? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, CPA. Let's have our second question, CPA Deco.
Thank you. My name is CPA Deco Mohammed, the Nomad Son. My question goes to Mr. Rafael Otieno. What are the measures in place to ensure that we don't breach the debt sustainability threshold? Second question is for Mr. Ndindi Nyoro. I heard that when you're in the budget committee, you are making allocations that favored your own constituency. So what are those allocations about? The third question still for you, Mr. Ndindi Nyoro. You know that our capitation for secondary school has been reduced from 22,000 to 16,000. So what went wrong when you were in the committee that made the CS for National Treasury to reduce the capitation from 22,000 to 16,000? Finally, to Mr. Raphael, concerning the pending bills. Recently this month, we have one suicide case whereby a supplier killed himself because of unpaid pending bills, and therefore Kiharu demanded from him 300 billion assessment, and he took his own life. So how can we dwell with the pending bills so that you don't bribe someone for you to be paid your service and you get your money? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. Asante sana. A question from the virtual audience. This is CPA Madheka. That was very enlightening and provoking, Honorable Nyoro. Assume you are president now. What top 5 aspects would you fix first? Over to you, FCPA Husband.
Thank you, Mwakazi. So our panelists, I hope you've picked out the questions that relate to you. I would let Raphael go first. Raphael, there are quite a number of questions that have been thrown away, and even some teasers. Could you speak to them, but also give us feedback in terms of just some assurance around the public debt space, and whether we should see doom or if we should go by your assurance that all is well. Over to you, Raphael.
Thank you very much, Edmund. I have to admit this was a great discussion. And I'm happy with the perspectives brought in by Honorable Nyoro and perspectives brought by Diana. And I think this is a kind of debate that we need to have as a country so that we deal with our issues without sugarcoating any challenges that we may be facing as a nation. Now, quite a number of issues have been raised, and I don't want to take too long because your lunchtime is approaching, and you probably will not be very happy if I deny you an opportunity to talk in the lunch. Now, the one critical response is to some issues raised by the fellow panelists. One is the issue of massaging the debt as GDP numbers. I can confirm that none of those numbers I presented is massaged. The only massaging that we have done is that Honorable Ndindi Nyoro was quoting a nominal debt GDP figure, and I have specified very clearly on those charts that is a present value of debt to GDP, which is what was 64% as at the end of it. The nominal number at the end of it was 67%. So no number is massaged, that is the actual number. And the Auditor General has just audited those numbers at the end of June, and her report will soon be submitted to Parliament, and you will see the number that is audited, which also, the report this time is also going to partly deal with the issue of securitization, because they raised a number of questions. They asked for all documents relating to securitization, and they have the figures that I believe they will be able to table to Parliament to show exactly how much have we securitized as a country, and therefore the public will be able to know what it is. Now, there was an issue of indicating that we seem to be massaging the exchange rate to help us deal with the debt service. Now, I have to admit, as indicated by Honorable Nyoro, that having a strong exchange rate helps a great deal with the debt service. If you look at our debt service numbers, when the Kenya shilling was 161 to the dollar and where we are now, the situation is completely different, and we have saved a great deal in debt service. But the exchange rate is not massaged. Actually, if the massaging is being done, it is the opposite of what Mheshimiwa was showing. You look at what the central bank has done in the last 1.5 years. Central bank has accumulated 5.2 billion in forex reserve, $2 billion US dollars worth of forex reserve purchased directly from the interbank foreign exchange market. If that was not being done, the Kenya shilling exchange rate to the dollar would have been 110 as we speak now. So it is that intervention in terms of purchasing the foreign currency that has enabled the shilling to remain at around 139. From where I sit, I think that rate is at a very good position for both importers and exporters alike. But I can confirm that the exchange rate is not deliberately misaligned as we speak at the moment. Now, there was a critical question which I think we also need to address. What are we doing with the borrowing? The borrowing that we are doing currently is implementing several projects that even Mheshimiwa himself mentioned one of them. Mudaiga, Kiambu, and Ndindi dual carriageway that we are building is from borrowing. We are building a road, the Horn of Africa Gateway project, starting from Isiolo, Mudogashe, Habaswein, Wajir, Kotulo, all the way to Mandera. That road is being built from borrowing. And there are several other projects, dams, that we are building to make sure that we have agriculture that is not just relying on the rain, so that you can have food security in this country. So there are several projects that we are doing with the borrowing, and those are available in the budget listed, and somebody can be able to go and pick it. I admit the level of borrowing is still very high. And what we need to do, not have the national treasury, but also the parliament. We need to work with parliament to make sure as we go forward, the level of deficit are drastically reduced, then we can maintain debt sustainability. If you allow me just two more things, Honorable Chair, the specific questions raised from the floor by the audience, which are basically questions of clarification. One is to do with the pending bills. How can we deal with the pending bills so that we don't have a situation where people have to bribe to be paid their pending bills? This is something that, again, as a government, we definitely have to deal with. The pending bills question we have to resolve once and for all. So far, the task force that the CS appointed to verify the pending bills has almost concluded the work. The initial phase of scrutinizing the pending bills has yielded a figure of about 235 billion in pending bills out of over 600 billion that has been verified. The component that is in pending is very small. So what does this tell us? This tells us that some of the so-called pending bills were not actually accurate. People were just submitting figures, hoping that they would pay. The documentation was not adequate, and therefore there is no basis of paying. The ones that have been verified, the 235 billion, the ones in the road sector, we have already paid almost 80%. And the others also will soon start paying. So this is an issue that we are planning to do this year, and we expect that once the historical pending bills are addressed, we will not encourage accumulation of pending bills, either by the State Department or by the county government. We will also discourage the county government as much as possible to avoid accumulating pending bills. Now, the measures we are putting in place to address, to avoid the breach of debt sustainability threshold, all the strategies I was highlighting are basically aimed at making sure that we do not breach the debt sustainability threshold. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, audience.
Thank you, Honorable Raphael Tupige Makofi. And as a member of the Pending Bills Verification Committee, I confirm that most of the road sector bills that were verified, we gave the go-ahead to be settled. The Pending Bills Committee should be done by the month of December. We now go to Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. Again, so many questions your way, compliments as well, and we thank you for the wonderful insights you've also shared. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Omolo. I'll be direct to the point. One, thank you very much, Raphael, also for your presentation. but it's important for you as you talk about forex reserves. Tell Kenyans is majorly a rearrangement. We have seen a decline in forex reserves in commercial banks and then an increase in forex reserves in government. And therefore, more of it is not an increase. It is a shift from commercial banks to actually public. Secondly, the issue of misalignment on Rafael of exchange rate. You say there is no misalignment. Misalignment meaning between what you get in the bank when you go to exchange and also what should be in terms of the other parameters. You say there is no misalignment, but you go ahead to say that Kenya shillings should be trading at 110. So I don't know what that is, because that is also a misalignment. The second question, I had many, but I'll be very brief. My brother who said about the previous position I held as the chairman of budget. And I started by saying that Kenya, in terms of parliament, has 3 committees that deals with the economy directly. So I was dealing with expenditure, another committee with debt, and another committee on finance with taxes and such. If you look at all our reports as budget committee then, all of them without exception, we talked about unsustainability of debt. So that was there, and it's there in the record. But number 2, I want to, because let's be candid as Kenyans. I mean, to Odoe PR. We talked about the regime of President Kibaki. We talked about the regime of Uhuru Kenyatta. We are now talking about this regime. So I want to request my brother to tell me, who was chairman of budget during President Kibaki's time? And why do they not get compliments for the work he did? Let us assign responsibility where it is due. And let us be honest. The committees in parliament, and especially when the committees on the government side, departmental committees, budget committee, what you do is to propagate the agenda of the collective responsibility. But we have to know where the buck stops. And that is why when we analyze South Korea, we analyze the then President General Park. So I think that suffices for now. But let me just add, at the time when I served as the chairman of budget, because my issue about borrowing is more about the illegal debts. None. There was no single illegal loan, secret loan taken in Kenya. And I actually attended one meeting with the people in the National Treasury. I don't know whether Rafael was there. And we actually declined and refused the issue of securitization. Even the current PS of the National Treasury was not for securitization, was not for those illegal loans. And therefore, again, you cannot wrap the records through a rubber. You can go to the websites. There was no securitization when I was budget chair. There was no illegal boats. Every borrowing was in the main book of government. Samuel, about Kiharu and achievements, what we do major in Kiharu is that community projects are done in what we call labor-based. And therefore, we end up having no one taking profits. So the entire utility of the money goes to the project. And that is why we achieve so much with Soritro. CPA Vincent, thank you very much for the compliments on borrowing, whether it is safe in terms of T-bills and boards. I just request, because there is no time, go and read about Ghana and haircuts. When Ghana reached where Kenya is going, the people who had lent to government were called in a round session. They were told, guys, we are in this situation. We know we owe you. We know I owe you 1 million shillings, but from today I owe you 700,000. It is a sovereign saying, so you do what you need to do. Read about Ghana, including pensions were cut. So when we reach a point where the government cannot service, the end result is to call leaders in a round table and basically say, we cannot. So whether to buy T-bills or boats, I think you can make that decision depending on your investment horizon. In terms of labor, there is some, we are not saying their names. In terms of labor, what it means to the deficit in Kenya, the labor unrest we are having in Kenya the root cause is inflationary pressures. Inflationary pressures, yes, we say the inflation has come down. I wish we had more time to talk about these things. But there is also the issue of purchasing power. So what you have done in Kenya, you are earning the same money you were earning last year in terms of the gross. Is the net, the last 5 years. You are earning the same money, actually being added. But is the bottom line the same? A person who was earning a gross of 100,000 5 years ago, and you're earning the same 100,000, is your net pay the same? There are much more deductions. So the purchasing power has been decimated. That is why we have unrest in terms of labor, because they are demanding for something equivalent from what they were getting before. And sorry, again, I'm talking too fast because of time. Somebody else again asked about the 3 committees in Parliament. I think I have exemplified that. And I thought you guys would give me compliments, because, and which you have done, because if an astronaut tells you about space, they have been in space. If an astronaut talks to you about, if a sailor talks to you about the oceans, they have been in the oceans. So I am glad to serve Kenyans in this capacity also, because I've been there and I want a better Kenya, and the more the reason I am speaking loudly. And by the way, I'll continue speaking loudly about these issues.
Thank you, thank you.
I can see I have a minute. Governor Aguma, in terms of the comparison, Governor, I did 3 years because I thought it would be unfair for this current administration, because they have only served for 3 years. So I took from when each one of them started, what they did for 3 years up to the end. So I couldn't take 10 years. There's not 10 years yet. 5 years is not yet. So I took what is available. And out of that, President Kibaki grew the economy by 36% in his first 3 years. President Uhuru by 21%. The current administration by 14.9%. Those are figures. They are facts. There is nothing much I can do about them. In terms of leadership, another brother, why do leaders... And I want to confront these issues as a year. Why are you talking now? I am talking about it now because even then, when I was talking with the reports, even the reports of the budget committee then indicate we were totally against illegal debts. And none of the illegal debts were taken when I was chairman of budget. 0 securitization, 0 illegal bonds, 0 secret loans, because it was wrong, it is still wrong. Honorable Captain, it was the same about President Kibaki. Only one mistake you did. President Kibaki, President Uhuru did not leave the loan of Kenya at 10.7. 2022, you can Google. The debt was 8.7 trillion. And therefore, this current administration took it from 8.7 trillion to the current 12.5 trillion. Therefore, every year, we are borrowing 1.25 trillion shillings. As I come to the finish, CPA Mohammed, I think it was more or less the same. Capitation. There is a brother of mine who asked, what did you do that is, when you were budget chair, that's making capitation to be cut? Capitation was not cut when I was chairman of budget. It was being cut, it is being cut now. And I can assure you, me, Sijipigi Kifua, there are things I was putting forward when we were making the budget. The current JSS interns who are confirmed, 46,000 of them, very few people were for that confirmation. Because they were saying, they are the same people who are in the streets. I said precisely the point. They are in the streets because they don't have money. So I have been a champion of education, and that is why even now, I feel very bad that the government is adding school fees for day scholars. And as my closing remark, I can assure you, as MP for Kiharu, we are not going to allow the government to add the burdens to the parents of day scholars. They can get the money from any other place, from any other vote, but you are not going to allow the government to annihilate free basic education. If there is an assurance I can give you, it is that one. Whatever it takes, capitation can only go up. It cannot come down. And therefore, we cannot shift the burden to the parents. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you, Honorable Ndindi. And I think he's aptly captured the questions raised. Maybe just for fact check, Ndindi Nyoro, we have hired 76,000 teachers in 3 years. The last regime hired 120,000 in 10 years. So that has also some aspects we have to appreciate. The other issue is that the capitation numbers used in Parliament consistently have been lower than the actual numbers of children that need to be supported. So if you give 22,000 for 100,000 students, it's different from the same amount for 150,000. So I think there are certain things that need to be aligned, but I agree with you. Let's remain vigilant for the good of our nation. Dan Agashingo, your questions and also your closing remarks. You can come here.
Thank you very much. Just two things. One, I want to agree with most of the contributors in plenary. We do not start with the problem of debt. We start with the expenditure problem. Where we are is because of how government uses the money. So in that regard, the Budgets Committee is very critical in how we deal with expenditure. And immediately thereafter, the 6 committees that work on accountability, the peak, PACs, and so on. The debt question in Kenya is not debt in abstract. It is an expenditure problem. Word has it that under this current regime, that we are losing 3 billion a day in corruption. If you do that math, it is 1 trillion. That is what we are supposed to borrow this year. So we can still have roads in northeastern